Economists often track, I'm talking about the same problem that's on your paper, right? Often track employment trends by measuring the proportion of people who are underemployed, meaning that they are either unemployed or would like to work full-time but are only working part-time. In the summer of 2010, 18.5% of Americans were underemployed. The mayor of Vicksburg wants to show the voters that the situation is not as bad in his town as it is in the rest of the country. His staff takes a simple random sample of 300 Vicksburg residents and finds that 48 of them are underemployed. Construct a significance test at alpha equals 0.05 level. So what is this going to be? P naught. That is the claimed proportion for the overall population. Mayor of Vicksburg wants to show the voters that the situation is not as bad in his town as it is the rest of the country. So what does that mean? So less than. It's for alternative. Takes a simple random sample. Well, that's important. Of 300. So 300 is our what? N. 48 of them, that's our what? We're using 48 over 300 as our p hat. You could call that as number of successes or x. Let me say p hat. But it is 48 out of 300 is decimal. The p hat was 48 out of 300, which is 0.16. And then alpha equals 0.05 level. So where do we start? What is our population going to be for this? So we're using the claim from all Americans, but we're wanting to see if we can apply it to all Vicksburg residents. So we are defining our parameter. Let P be the proportion, what? I don't really need to say of Vicksburg residents again. Population. Now with this, I could get really, really wordy. Or instead of saying, meaning they are either unemployed or would like to work full-time but are only working part-time, what could I put there? So I'm saying I understand that this is specific to what it means to be underemployed, and the problem did a very good job of defining this for us. So instead of taking the time to literally write it all out, I'm just going to say as defined in the problem. All right, so my null hypothesis, we pretty much already talked through both of these, is going to be what? So what's a better way to write that? Because I don't want to keep switching back and forth between percents and decimals, but there's nothing wrong with writing 18.5%. So then our alternative is what the mayor is trying to find evidence of, which is P is.
So is it because like he wants to show it's not that bad, so he wants to show all the stuff that isn't that bad?
So like you would have to know context in this problem that bad means more unemployed. And then my last thing is It gave us that, so I don't have to say since not defined the problem. So plan, what's my method? Remember, we don't have to write anything with an arrow to Z because we only use Z with proportions, so we don't have to say why we're using Z. What is my first condition? What do I write? Which means what is my next condition? So what do I need to check for normal? And so I'm going to go ahead and this one, since it doesn't give it to me, I'm just going to go ahead and do it this way. It doesn't really matter if I go ahead and put numbers in there or not. It's up to you. So my N is what? I'm multiplying 300 times what is 300 times 0.185? So I kind of just added in a step. Instead of putting all of this up in there, I just split it. The 300 times what else? Which is going to be 300 minus 55.5, which leaves me with, which is also greater than or equal to 10. So there are at least how many? Who am I talking about? Who or what am I talking about? This is one of those where I told you it's a little bit funnier. Theoretically, this is saying there are at least 10 residents sampled that would have been underemployed and not underemployed. So I am fine with being less specific here and just saying there are at least 10 Vicksburg residents that I'm still going to say as defined by the So this is a little funny because this is, right now it looks like population. It's more correct to say sampled, but it's not that the sampled one really was at least 10. So that's why I'm a lot more vague about this and will be more lenient when I grade it. Last chapter, it was literally, I gave you the number of successes and the number of failures, and you use that, and it only applied to that sample. So what do I have to finish with? What's my last condition? Which is 10% condition. Capital N greater than or equal to 10N. End up getting 3,000. And I would need to say there are at least 3,000 what? And now there, if you weren't specifically talking to about the population, I would still count off because that part has never changed. It's always about individuals and population. All right, so do. What's the first thing I need? Which we already talked about is 48 over 300, which ends up being 0.16. What else do we need? N, which is 300, P naught, which is, what else?
It's 1, 2.
And I'm going to talk about something tomorrow about why I'm so weird about calling this test statistic and not T. So what's our generic equation? Not Z. Remember, this is the part where people are going to mess up not doing P naught down there. So I'm just plugging in my numbers. P hat is what? Minus 0.185. And then I'm plugging that in the bottom. So square root of 0.185 times 0.815 over 300. If I do want to go less than.
Negative 1.1152.
And just, now, I don't care what you write here. A lot of times, because me reminding myself that I'm doing T would stop there. But there's nothing wrong with writing more decimals. So if I do Z, I do it 2 decimals. If I do T, I do it 3. Usually, unless it's one of the Z's on the T table.
Z, you did to do T,
Because when you look at those tables, that's how it is. But me or the AP Stat doesn't actually care what you use. Alright, so I'm going to draw that. Which is negatives. It's going to be over here somewhere. And which way do I shade and why? Left, why?
less.
Because our alternative says less than.
and now we do our C. I mean our D, C.
So what does it look like? Yes, but what does it look like in your calculator? Normal speed, yeah. And I don't remember this one off the top of my head. What do we get as our p-value? 131 what?
4. Wait, what's our mu?
You should be on the second distribution almost.
Yeah, second distribution.
Oh, you always leave mu 0, sigma 1. Yeah, that's a z. And so what do I put in between? There's not less than. So our decision for our conclude is that we failed to reject our null hypothesis that since our is not alpha equal 0.05. So let's write this one in context, or I'm going to write this one in context, but I don't care which one you choose. So we okay, I'm not going to write this one all the way out. Some people are going to write this one as we do not have convincing evidence that the situation is not as bad in this town as it is in the rest of the country. Actually, that's not a bad one to write. But instead of saying all of this, most of you instead are just going to choose to write and these two things are equivalent. So I would imagine most of you just go with the easy one and write HA because you don't have to think, and that is absolutely fine.